Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Paratalk. This episode I am joined by the one and only Mr. Curiousworld, and we are going to be talking about one of my favourite subjects, time slips.
Hello Reeves, how are you?
I'm alright, how are you?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, very well.
Good. Time slips, what's your thoughts on them?
Yeah, indeed. Well, it's something that's fascinated me for years, really. One of those things where, I think it could happen. That all of these accounts that we've heard over the years. I mean, as you know, there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of them.
Yeah.
And they're all, a lot of them are really fascinating, and it's it would be nice to think that these things do happen, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. Yeah.
But yeah, it's and if it is true, if they do happen, then it's obviously a freak occurrence. It's something that 1 in a million chance of happening, and I'm not completely against the idea of it being true.
So what we've done for this episode, it's going to be quite a laid back episode. We picked a number of alleged cases that are reasonably, if you was going to put them in a book of cases of time slips, these cases would be in there because they have like witnesses and there's other people involved. I'll have a read through them and then we'll have a talk about each one. But the first case is from Kent and Tunbridge Wells to be exact. And this happened on the 18th of June 1968 in the morning. And so it goes like this, okay? I'll read it out so that you get the vibe. Mrs. Charlotte Warburton went shopping with her husband in town. They decided to go their separate ways for a while and meet up later. She was unable to find a particular brand of coffee from her usual grocer's, so she went into a supermarket in Calvary Road. As she entered the shop, she saw a small cafe through the entrance in the left-hand side. She had never before realised that the cafe was there. It was rather old-fashioned with wood-panelled walls, and there were no windows, and the room was lit by a number of electric bulbs with frosted shades. So kind of pretty old school. I mean, it's like a pretty old cafe.
Yep.
There was at the time, she thought, nothing especially odd about the scene. 2 women in long dresses were sitting at one table, and about half a dozen men, all in dark lounge suits, were sitting at the other tables. I'm going to kind of just skip back because it's like that's a bit confusing. So she's seeing a cafe which kind of looks a little bit out of place, and the people in this cafe are wearing those kind of like the old long dresses that the ladies used to wear, and then the guys are wearing like the dark suits. So it's all very sort of formal, not the sort of cafe that you would expect people to be in like the 60s, nearly the 70s. You'd think people would be in casual dress, I suppose. So that's kind of a little bit of a one red flag. Anyway, so it carries on, right? Okay, all the people seem to be drinking coffee and chatting. A normal sight for a country town at 11 o'clock in the morning. Right, so it continues. Mrs. Warburton did not stay, but she certainly did not recognise anything amiss either. Then, indeed, for several days, even rather formal and slightly off-key clothing made no immediate impression on her. So she did kind of notice that the clothing that the people were wearing was a bit off.
Yeah.
So she's obviously that's in her mind. Nor did the fact, although the customers were talking, there was no noise from them that caused her to question her senses. Nor did
there was no noise at all. Sorry,
to
cut you off there. Is she saying there was no noise at all?
Yeah,
thought that would really stand out.
Well, that's a bit weird. So the customers were talking. There was no noise from them that caused her to question her senses. Nor did she notice that there was no smell of coffee. So,
So there was no aroma at all. I know we were only going by what is written down, and we can question it forever, can't we? So if there's no aroma at all, I would have thought that would have been quite jarring.
Yeah, and no smell of coffee, and she didn't really. Well, thinking back, she didn't think that she could hear the people actually in conversation. That's so. It continues. There is clearly something strange here. Yeah, and this is the person writing this. There is clearly something strange here. And the question of circumstances in which she found herself. Mrs. Warburton left the cafe and then went to meet her husband. she did not suggest to him that the scene in the cafe seemed to be very odd. So she's not really thinking about it. She's just like, yeah, that's a bit odd. But then you do that, don't you? When you go somewhere and you have an experience like at the time, nine times out of 10, at the time, you don't really sort of process it. It's only when you come away.
Yeah, and you could easily walk in. I mean, I've done it many times. You walk in somewhere, you think, no, this isn't for me, and you walk straight out.
Yeah. So,
nothing of it.
So it says, when they came to Tunbridge Wells on their next shopping expedition, Mrs. Warburton decided to take her husband to the cafe, or rather, she hoped to take him there. But of course, they never did find the place, though they searched the streets up and down. So it had gone, yeah? Okay, you could play devil's advocate. It depending on the amount of time that had gone by. You could say maybe the cafe closed down.
Yeah, well, apparently the cafe in question was part of a cinema complex. And the cinema, I looked it up, closed down in 1960, 8 years before this allegedly occurred.
So it's like, yeah, the cinema and assembly rooms had all vanished years ago. Mrs. Warburton was told, on the 18th of June 1968, she had stepped into the past like others involved in a time slip had accepted without question. So it was almost, as you say, that she was going into an area. I talked about this the other day regarding what people coin like hauntology, the ghosts of the past. And you think about it, right? There's many things that this could be, all right? It could be a simple case of someone getting a bit confused and then putting sort of 2 and 2 together and getting 5.
Could have just been in the wrong place and not had the right street.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as that, yeah.
They were told in the supermarket that there was no cafe there. She must be in the wrong building. It was then that they learned that Cosmo Cinema stood on the site of the supermarket. It had a small cafe. They were directed to the Tunbridge Wells Constitutional Club, where the steward told them that at one time the club, which had owned the premises adjoining to the Cosmo, was incorporated into the supermarket. The club had an assembly room in those days, and at the rear, a small bar with tables and refreshments. Miss Warburton's description tallied exactly with the club's old refreshment rooms.
It's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? I mean, I know that earlier on I may have sounded like I was trying to disregard it, but I'm not at all. I think it is absolutely fascinating. I was just trying to look at the different sort of possibilities of how it could have come around. The more
a logical explanation.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the more logical explanations.
Saying that, I mean, before we get to question, we have one. Okay, so that's the first case where a lady and her husband, they travel into the city, they split up. She goes shopping for her favourite coffee. She can't find it in the local place, so she goes somewhere different. She sees a cafe in this building. And she thinks, like, that's a bit odd. I've never noticed that place before. So she's obviously familiar with the area and the buildings. She doesn't notice this place, comes home, thinks to herself, something's a bit off there. Those people looked a bit out of, dressed a bit weird. So they do a bit of digging around, and then they find out that they go back. They think they're going to go back. They're going to find it, and she's going to show her husband, look, this is the place I was on about. They can't find it. It's not there. So they do a bit of digging around and they find out that, there used to be a place, but it was there closed years ago. It used to be part of a cinema. It was a refreshment room for people to chill out for a little bit. And she also described what it looked like. So, you could say, okay, time slip in the sense of a parallel dimension. Maybe she saw into a time when, it still existed. Or maybe she looked back in time.
That's something that I've always wondered about these things, because time slips, okay, it's not quite the same as the idea of time travel, obviously, because time travel, the notion of time travel is that you could physically be there for long periods of time. But I would have thought, in order for this to be real, in order for time slips to be possible, obviously these realities, they need to exist somewhere.
Yeah.
So at some point you've got to cross over into that other time. And another thing that I always question is that the moment of transition, what happens in the moment of transition? Because surely if you're going back, especially if it's quite a few years, it's not only going to be a few things here and there that are going to change. A great deal is going to change. The buildings around you, the ground beneath you, the weather possibly. At what point do they think, I'm in a different place?
Maybe in some cases, now this is just pure speculation, maybe that when they have this event, that only a small area is affected, like a little bubble. Maybe, I don't know, a few feet across, 30, 40 feet, and that only in that bubble is affected. So everything outside of that bubble is still remains the same. But
I wasn't suggesting that the entire world.
No, I know what you mean, because there are cases, though, where people have been in buildings and the environment has changed, and they've looked out of the window, and it's been the olden days out of the window.
Yes.
So the environment does change externally, even if you're in a building. You are right in what you say. There are cases where that does happen, but I'm thinking maybe if you're in a small area and you have this experience, maybe it's only that area that's affected.
Yeah, but when you cross over into that bubble, as you say, you don't hear about any transitional sensation.
I do know of one case. A person was being chased by a security. I think it was a security guard or a policeman.
Yes, that was.
He said he ran down an alleyway and he suddenly became quite disorientated and hot and dizzy.
Oh, I see.
And then he ran out of the other end of the alley and he was in a completely different place. It was the same place but a different time.
I do remember that, actually. I think I mentioned that in one of my videos. That was a Bold Street one.
We got another case here. It's another time slip incident that took place in Kent some years earlier. In 1935, Dr. E.G. Moon, very down-to-earth Scots physician with a practice in Broadstairs, visiting his patient, Lord Carlson, who lived in Cleve Court. After talking to Carlson, the doctor left his patient and made his way downstairs into the hallway. His mind was clearly very occupied at the time with the instructions he had given to the nurse about the prescription that he had left for Carlson. That was his patient. At the front door, Dr. McMoon hesitated, wondering whether he should go back upstairs and have another word with the nurse. It was at this point that the doctor noted that his car was no longer where he had left it, in the driveway. In fact, it had been parked alongside a thick yew hedge that was also missing. That's a bit weird. That's a bit scary, actually. Even the drive down which he had driven from the main road was now nothing more than a muddy track, and a man was coming towards him. The newcomer on the scene, only 30 yards from Dr. Moon, was rather oddly dressed, wearing an old-fashioned coat with several capes around his shoulders, and he wore a top hat of the kind seen in the previous century. As he walked, he smacked a switch against his riding boots. I suppose it's like a riding whip or something. But over his shoulder, he carried a long-barreled shotgun. He stared hard at Mr. Moon, and the doctor registered, in fact, that the man was coming towards him might have looked more at home in the 19th century. Remarkably, Dr. Moon seemed not at all at the time to be either alarmed or even mildly surprised by the change of scenery. He simply turned away, and without any concern, to go back into the house. But he did quite casually take one more look at the scene, and now, as if by magic, the car was back where it had been the yew hedge too. The drive was no longer a muddy track, and the man had also disappeared. Everything was back to normal. And it was only now that Dr. Moon realised that something decidedly odd had occurred. Yeah, that's a weird one, that, isn't it?
Yeah, that is another strange one. In cases like that, it would be very interesting to see if there was any sort of record. I know that was obviously
like something in the paper.
In the paper, or something else that I read recently that I think it was mentioned in the link that you sent me. It's when they do supposedly cross over. Do the people on the outside see them for real, or is it just an imagination? If they really are there records of going back hundreds of years of people seeing people supposedly from the future?
When you think of time slips and people appearing and going back into the past, would the viewer that's seeing that person, would they see that person as a person, or would they see that person as a translucent being, or would they think that they were a ghost?
Maybe that is the explanation for a lot of paranormal reports.
When I read these stories, I immediately try to put myself in a position of someone that is having this experience. There are times when you are in situations and you become strangely calm in a crazy situation. 9 times out of 10, the reason that you're calm is because you know that you need to get yourself out of this situation. And if you lose your cool, everything goes crazy. When you're in this situation where you walk down the stairs, you open the door, and then all of a sudden your car's gone, the hedgerow's gone, the driveway is now a muddy track, and you're looking out the door and you're thinking, what on earth is going on here? I mean, you must think, I'm having a mental breakdown.
Yeah.
My mind's going.
It does. It would drive you nuts. I think this is a lot of the reason why a lot of people don't believe this sort of thing, because they just can't sort of get their head around how somebody in that situation could be so calm and report it as if it was just this strange occurrence. But yeah, it would be interesting for, I know, did you say Dr. E.G. Moon?
Yeah.
Experienced that. What if there was any sort of record of, I know there was no photography back then, but if there was any sort of record of how the land looked, or if there was any artwork, or to see if what he was seeing is actually tallied up to what actually existed.
So he had his whole experience right on the doorstep. He was stood at the door on the edge looking out, okay, and he was looking at this scene. I wonder what would have happened if he'd have took one step forward into the scene.
Yeah.
Would he have stayed there forever? Would he have just suddenly vanished out of time? Okay, so I'm going to get a bit weird now, but these cases fascinate me simply because is this possibly what happened to people who just vanish, who just disappear, who are literally seen 1 minute and then they're gone the next? Do they somehow slip out of time into another timeline?
If they did that, especially if it was the past, there would be a lot more. Don't you think there would be a lot more reports of strange people from the future who have suddenly appeared?
Yeah, but maybe if they slipped into a parallel universe, that wasn't directly connected to us.
Okay.
That was, if you think of the many worlds theory, where we have copies of our time stream layered on top of one another like a great big sandwich, and that they're not all connected, but they run in parallel with each other, but each one is slightly different. Now, if you think of it, right, imagine those time streams as waves where they're moving. They're not like railway tracks. They're not solid, but they're waves, so they're moving, like washing on a washing line. And now and again, they touch, right?
Yes, that's a nice way to describe it.
Yeah, and they touch, and for a split second, them touching, anyone that's in that area, that locale, depending on where that other time stream is it in the past or is it in the future, all the events that happen are the same, but they might not happen in exactly the same order, And so if a person is in a particular place and they go across the veil and then those veils disjoint again, they're left there, aren't they?
Yeah.
And would it be a case of like waking up one morning, put it this way, you go to bed, right? You go to sleep and you get up in the morning and you do everything that you normally do. You go to work or whatever, you do you live your day. And then when you get home, you sit down and you think, oh, I'm going to watch my favourite TV show. You go to watch your favourite TV show and you think, oh, it's not on. And then you look in the newspaper or whatever for the listings, and you find that you can't find it anywhere. So you do a bit of Googling on Google and you find that there's no such TV show that ever existed.
Yeah.
And then you start to get a bit worried because you think, where's my TV show? And then you think to yourself, oh, maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe I imagined it. And then you start to get a bit worried. But then again, maybe that you've crossed over into a time stream where that TV show never existed.
Oh, we could be getting into the Mandela effect sort of area well, which is another interesting topic.
Well, that's a whole can of worms in itself, I think, the whole Mandela. But we've got, before I'm going to stop myself waffling, because we've got another story from Tunbridge Wells. So it says Tunbridge Wells has thrown up another odd story. May or may not have been a time slip. This tale goes back to sometime in the mid-19th century, and it took place in the Swan Hotel. Mrs. Nancy Fuller and a young daughter, Naomi, on the first visit to the town, took a room at the top of the hotel. The room now is number 16. As they climbed the stairs to the room, girl's behaviour began to change. She appeared to be more and more agitated, closing her eyes and whispering to herself. When her mother asked her what was wrong, Naomi replied that she recognised the stairway, that she had been here before. So she's saying that she's been in this place before. Then she came out with an astounding remark that her lover was waiting for her in the room, and he had said that he'd always would. This sounds like she's being possessed or something. When they entered the room, the young girl went at once to the corner, calling out John, as though to someone standing there waiting. For a few seconds, her mother's eyes seemed to change. Okay, so, right, I just want to go back a bit to the bit where she's walking up the stairs, because I'm having a bit of a brainstorm here where maybe she's not actually experienced a time slip. Maybe she's experiencing some form of a mental projection in her mind, where she's reliving a moment rather than a time slip. But I finished the last paragraph, and then we can discuss. So it's just a story that Naomi told her mother was that she had previously lived in the building, and it was a privately owned house. This was certainly before 1935, when it became the Swan. In those days,
in the Swan,
so it used to be a private residence. This is long before it was a hotel or anything. In those days, when Naomi had lived there, it had been known as High House. The young girl went on to explain that she had a love affair with a man called John, but her father had disapproved of the young man, was taken away, and had locked her in alone in the room. Aware that she had never see him again, she conjured up the image of John holding her hand and imagined her lover. She jumped to her death from the window. So she committed suicide.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a common... I'm not saying it's not true, but how often do you hear the disapproving father who locks the daughter in her room and then she jumps out of the window, or the disapproving husband who's found out about a lover and lock them in it's quite a common theme for women to jump out of windows and for rooms to be haunted. But
don't know about this one. It sounds more like a bit of a tale that somebody told someone, and over the years it's kind of become its own thing, because, as you say, it's got all the recipe of a love story gone bad, and the disapproving father who locks the daughter in the room, says you're not going anywhere, and she's like, okay, if I can't see him, then I'll kill myself. It's all very extreme.
Yeah, and it sounds like a reincarnation story rather than a time slip story as well.
It's more kind of like ghost orientated, where I think that if there is anything to it, it's maybe the young girl, has an experience, and she maybe sees or experiences something, a feeling of the past or something like that. But as for time slip, I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know. But from reading that anyway, I get that vibe. The first two that we just talked about, they're definitely there's a lot somewhat to those. But that one, don't know about that. I'm not too sure. I mean, what are your thoughts?
I agree with you. Especially the first one, it sounds feasible in my mind anyway. I know there are people listening who probably think that I'm crazy for thinking it, but the first one, it does sound like it could be something that happened, and also the second one as well. But the further back you go, for some reason, it becomes, to me at least, it becomes less believable, because it's an old story, and as you know, over time things get retold, and the story's changed. But I agree with you. The first two stories sound definitely more likely.
For this one, this was written by or put together by Tony Walker, who which has got the Classic Ghost Stories podcast. I think he's been on Paratalk. We had an episode with Tony on Paratalk. But anyway, he writes this one. This is quite an interesting one. This is in Penrith in Cumbria. So this is on a hot day in August, mid-1970s. Angela and her friend set out onto a path from the Beacon Edge. The walk takes about 15 minutes, and the path has many abrupt angles and zigzags through the trees. Trees crowd thickly around the track as they climb over an old craggy sandstone outcrop. Soon you feel quite apart from the everyday world. It's an odd feeling, and that you have the impression that someone is watching you from the woods on either side. So it's a track in bushes with woods either side. That's kind of creepy to start with. Yeah. You go up and up, changing direction, losing sight of the path below and behind you. Even more creepier. As Angela and her friend climbed that day, they chatted away, but Angela reports how the atmosphere grew increasingly heavy. Now, that's interesting because other people that have had time slip phenomenon, or have had what they believe to be time slip phenomenon, have also said that when it happens, or when it's happening, that they feel a heavy presence, a heavy feeling, like you said earlier about the environment changing.
Well, that kind of answers my question that I asked earlier, because I thought, well, what happens in that transitional period? Well, there you go. That's it.
Well, he notes that as if there was a thunderstorm in the air. Yeah, that kind of heavy, repressive.
I've heard that as well in other time slip stories about thunder being involved.
Yeah,
and lightning.
Thunder and lightning. Yeah. They walked up many times and weren't much taking any notice of their surroundings until they turned the corner and stopped. They both saw it, an old-fashioned cottage, roughly made of stone. Angela said it was like a dwelling in the Middle Ages. The trouble was there had never been a cottage there before. Smoke was coming out from the chimney, so someone was home. Angela says that there was a very uncanny feeling about the place. She looked at her friend, and as the door began to open, they both fled. Well, that's creepy. You don't know who's inside, you know what I mean?
I want to see. I don't know, I suppose if you knew, or if you were aware that you may have slipped into a different time, I'd think, well, who the hell is this? I want to see this person. But then again, that's easy for me to say, isn't it? Sat here.
When she worked up the courage to climb the hills some month later, the cottage wasn't there. Her friend would never talk about the experience. That's very much like a case. I'm not gonna even try to get all the facts right. I'm just going to tell the story. It's about a group of, I think they're air cadets. And they are.
I heard the story yesterday.
Oh, did you? They were out on.
Go ahead. Yeah.
They were out on training manoeuvres, and they had to do some map reading. Yeah. And they were up on a hill, and they saw that their map took them down into a village. From the hill, they could see that it was a quaint village. There was a church. There was, smoke. It was inhabited. There were people that said, "Oh, that's where we got to go." So as they went down into the village, they started to get a very strange feeling. And when they actually got into the village, none of the buildings seemed inhabited. The buildings all seemed to have changed into very old-looking, basic style buildings. There was no church to be. They couldn't find the church.
Yeah.
And one of the young lads said that it was eerily quiet. They couldn't hear anything. They looked in the window of one of the buildings, and it was just an empty stone floor. It had a carcass of a cow or a pig or something hanging up, which had been partly skinned, and the doors were all kind of shut. And it was as if they were looking in on a scene. They started to all get the very uneasy feeling that they shouldn't be there. So they turned around and left the place, and they went back up onto the hill. And when they looked back, it was all back to normal again.
Yeah, I heard the story yesterday, but I can't remember the where it had occurred.
Yeah, you do a quick Google, you'll find it. But the thing was, where could they have possibly been? When would the village was like that? And it was a long time ago. It was like medieval or something that the village would have been in that kind of state. Very sort of run down and basic and stuff like that. I think they were air cadets, and they had this experience, and they didn't talk about it. It scared them quite a lot.
It was 1957.
There we go. Yeah. Were they air cadets?
Yes, they were. And it just says it's in the heart of rural England, which I hate that kind of description. I like it when it's a lot more specific than that.
And what was it? What does it say about them going into the village? They went in...
Oh, no, hang on. It does go on. It says, what happened to three boys on October morning more than 50 years ago remains a mystery. They were walking on a map reading exercise.
That's right. Yeah.
So been straightforward. The idea was to navigate their way across 4 or 5 miles of countryside to a designated point, then return to the base and report what they had seen. It would have been the picturesque Suffolk village of Kersey.
That's it, Kersey. That's it.
Yeah.
They saw that village as it was a long time before. Well, they shouldn't have been there, put it that way. Apparently. Just imagine, what's the catalyst? What was the catalyst there for them to slip back? It was just a lovely sunny day, and they were out on there doing their training, and they walked, that's what I'm saying. Maybe the veils touched together.
This is what I was going to say. Maybe there was no catalyst as such. It's just like, as you were saying, just one of those points where extremely 1 in a million rare occasions where the veils touched and they just happened to be there. And it's funny because if that, just assuming that theory is true, then there are obviously points in our world where that happens more often. Because how many stories have we had from Bond Street? How many There's been quite a few stories from Tunbridge Wells as well.
Yeah,
there are points in our world where this happens.
Personally, I still find time slips feasible. I think it's something that could happen.
Yeah,
I do think it's something that could happen. I do think that that there's many cases out there where people just vanish, and not just in England, all over the world. For example, maybe the people that go missing in the American national parks.
I was going to say, I thought that's what you were going to say. Yes.
Yeah. Maybe there's something over there where the veil is quite thin, or maybe the veil, there's big bubbles over there where people can walk into it and they just, they're gone. They're not dead, but they've just moved. They've transitioned into a different time stream.
Theories surrounding the national parks, but they've got nothing to do with time slips. But that is an interesting theory.
With national parks and people going missing, it's a red flag where the people that run those parks are always very reluctant to tell people, when you ask how many people have disappeared, and we can't talk about that. We don't disclose numbers. We don't talk about anything like that. They try to play it down. And I understand from one point of view, if it's a tourist destination, you don't want to scare people. Because the majority of people that go to these places have a wonderful time. They do a bit of camping or whatever, and they have an amazing time in nature, and it's all great, and they see the wildlife, and it's lovely. And then you have a small minority of people that go to these places, and it's absolute hell. They lose a family member, they lose a child.
Children go missing there.
Yeah, and they're never seen again. People go missing. They find that they do a search of the area, and then weeks later they'll find the body in an area that's been heavily searched. And here's another thing. Why is it that a lot of these bodies that are found are always by water? All right, okay, we're going to get. All right, I don't want to open up too many cans of worms with this episode, but if you think about it, a lot of these bodies are found by water. Okay, running water or a lake or whatever, and then you also think about the UFO phenomenon, where people have UFO sightings, and a lot of the times they're by water or by wet areas. So I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Maybe. I don't know. What are your final thoughts on it? What do you think? You give me. I've had enough. I've had my say.
Yeah, time slips. I think it's fascinating. I think it is possible. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. Obviously, a 1 in a million chance of it happening. But yes, I believe that it's quite possible. And I'm to be honest, if it is possible, I'm a little jealous of those who have experienced it, because I would love to just take a glimpse into the past, even if it was just for a few seconds, wouldn't you?
Well, maybe we have, and we just don't realise it.
Don't realise it.
Maybe those moments of deja vu or whatever that we get, or that sort of quivery feeling down your back when you're at a certain place, maybe that is you walking into a little pocket of the past, and you're walking through it. Maybe when you go to that old house, that old manor house, and you're walking around all that place and you get that funny feeling, maybe you've suddenly stepped back into the past for a slight moment. Maybe those people in the past have just seen you as a ghost. I don't know. I'm simply speculating, but it's all very interesting. All very interesting.
Depending on how much research somebody's willing to do, maybe you could tally them up and look, right, okay, there was a time slip in this area. This allegedly happened. They allegedly went back to this time. Maybe go back and look at newspapers from that time and see if there is
Yeah.
any reports of a ghost sighting in that area. It's something that would make a really interesting video, I think, if you could link say two different events.
Well, there you go. There's your next Curious World video.
Yeah, well,
That's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It really is, but I'm absolutely fascinated by it. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, so I think I think we've concluded, and this episode has run its course, and a great episode it was. Just a tiny little look into time slips. I mean, obviously, you could be here forever talking about it because it is a huge topic. So what have you got planned for your next upcoming postings to YouTube?
Well, as you know, I've started my second channel now, which is the paranormal channel.
Yeah.
And I've hit a little bit of a roadblock with that one. It's unfortunate because I've recently had a message from YouTube saying that it's been declined for monetization.
Oh.
Now I know monetization isn't everything, but it does make everything a little bit more worthwhile, and it does give you a lot more motivation.
Yeah.
To work on the channel. And the reason they've given me is because it's too similar to Curious World, the Curious World channel. Now, because of that, I am going to take a slightly different... I'm still going to make my ghost story videos as I do.
Yeah.
As a side thing, I'm also going to... I've decided that I'm going to speak to individuals the similar way that you are to me now.
Yeah.
If not in person, over the internet, I would love to meet them in person and maybe make a video, film an interview, and just record people's accounts of ghost sightings and paranormal experiences, and change the channel up a little bit that way. So if there's anybody out there who would be interested in speaking to me about a specific sighting or experience they've had, then please do get in touch.
Sounds like a great idea. I mean, even easier, than getting it from the person that happened to,
Yeah.
So that sounds pretty cool.
It's different for me, and it'll keep the algorithm happy as well.
Oh yeah, we've all got to keep the algorithm happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to keep the Big Brother algorithm happy, but that's another story for another day.
Yeah, but I am traveling to the States later this year as well. I'm going to. I've always wanted to see certain states, and I'm going to Kentucky, and I'm going to Kansas as well later this year. And hopefully, I'm going to look into some cases while I'm out there, and hopefully make some get some good content out of that visit.
Oh yeah, that would be great. You get plenty of B-roll, put something together. Maybe write to a few podcasters or whatever, or YouTubers when you're over there, and sort of maybe do a meet up and do a little bit of an interview. That'd be quite cool.
That's an idea. Yeah. Yeah.
Make it happen. Just make that happen. Anyway, okay. So great episode. I hope everybody was listening and enjoyed it. I'm sure that Curious World will be back at some point, and we'll pick another topic to talk about. Once again, thanks again for joining me on this episode.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me again.
It's always a pleasure to have a chat with you. Paratalkpodcast.com for all of your Paratalk requirements. And until the next episode, we'll talk to you soon.